It's my great pleasure to be with an old friend and colleague, Joe Morrissey from Segment. Joe, I think we go back, I want to say it's probably to the MongoDB days.
That's right.
I want to do a proper introduction for you. I want to congratulate you on just unbelievable success at Segment and a great outcome of a $3.2 billion acquisition recently by Twilio. Tremendous growth and success by driving company transformation. And I'm really looking forward to how we're going to talk about that today, kind of how you did that, but also incredibly impressive around 150% growth in ARR over a 2-year period. So first of all, Joe, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, buddy. I'm really looking forward to talking to you because, in our preparation of this conversation, there's so much relevant content into what great companies and what companies that are trying to be great are focusing on. And we're going to talk about that today. But, before we get started, tell us a little bit about Segment, kind of like the problems that you solve and who you are.
Yeah. So Segment enables customer-focused growth with good data. Well, so what does that mean? Well, we provide a single API for customers to collect and clean, activate, and now orchestrate all of their customer data. And so the outcomes that we're trying to drive with customers are to enable them to become data-driven decision makers, to enable them to move faster and more efficiently with a modern marketing tech stack, and to reduce customer acquisition cost, increase lifetime value, and to manage their customer data in a secure, compliant manner so that they can govern their data in regards to things like GDPR, and then just manage their most sensitive asset, which is their customer data. So they're the outcomes we help drive for customers and problems we're trying to solve.
Awesome. And such a really, really hot space. Before we kind of dig into more of those outcomes and frameworks that you use to kind of get yourself there, I want to bring us back to you're coming to us live today from Menlo Park, California, I think. And I'm thinking back a couple of years ago, and I'm looking down on my phone, and I see a number from Ireland, and I don't know if you had changed your number. For some reason, it didn't come up with your name, and I answered the phone, and it's you, and we had a really, really interesting and cool conversation. You were telling me about this great opportunity, but you were also, this was probably maybe a month or so before you were going to start at Segment. Can you take us back to that phone call, what we call the phone call?
Yeah. Wow. You're bringing me right back now. So I was very excited to join Segment. I rare that you come across a company that has such a great culture, great product, and such a massive market opportunity ahead. But I also knew that there were going to be a lot of significant challenges. And, one of the things that made Segment so great was just we had lots of really, really smart people, especially in our sales team. And, we had a great product that customers loved. And so we were growing really, really quickly. And a lot of that growth in the early stages was what we call product-led. But, that in itself presented significant challenges. It was clear from my early discovery that there was a looming retention challenge with customers. Our engineering team was also finding it difficult to focus because they were working on so many customer escalations. And a lot of that came down to, the fact that sometimes they felt expectations were being misset by go-to-market with customers. So that was an issue. And then as we scaled, one of the great reasons we were able to grow so quickly was we trained our people very, very well on the product. So we immersed everybody in deep product training. And when I joined, our chief product officer said, look, you're going to have to scale the sales team here dramatically. My recommendation is that, you put everybody through the same type of intensive product training that we put them through when we were smaller. And I felt like that would be exactly the wrong thing to do, right? These were big problems. And I needed a transformative way to address all of these issues holistically. I knew I needed to have a scalable way to enable our sales team. I knew I needed to be able to operate in a different manner with customers and align our solutions to problems that they were looking to solve, that we could measure the success accordingly with, so that we could also give focus back to the other areas of the company that needed it. And then I knew that to do all of this, we really needed to get not just sales and success around the same table, but the entire company around the table and on a single point of view on, what are the problems that we solve for our customers? How specifically do we solve them? Where have we done it before? And how should we talk about them? Right? And so, for me, there are lots of different ways that you can try and affect transformation, but it was clear that getting everybody on the same page and getting alignment was probably the most important and first thing that I had to do. And having been through the value framework workshop with you before in the past at companies like MongoDB, John, I knew that this was an opportunity to do that. And I know you also only get one shot. And so that's what prompted that first early call from me to you prior to even starting at Segment.
Yeah, well, there's so much rich content in there. A couple of things. First of all, from a CRO's perspective, like one of the things that I was so impressed with is that you had done your homework, your due diligence, and you knew exactly where this company was. You knew exactly how the executive team viewed transformation, what were going to be some of the challenges, what were going to be some of the benefits. It was an amazing conversation for me because you were mapping out your roadmap prior to even starting. So one of the messages I just want to have out there for CROs, and Joe's a great resource to tap into to have that discussion with. But that was very, very, very telling for me. The second thing is, before we go too much farther, I want to dig in a little bit more on this product-led growth, because that is every day Force Management is having conversations with companies, with investment communities, with resources that are thinking about going into certain companies. And product-led growth is kind of like, the 10 years ago, we were talking about sales 2.0 or whatever, and you had more of a collaborative sale with SDRs and customer success and account executives. And okay, now we are in this era of this product-led growth. Would you do me a favor and just give us kind of your definition of what that means? And then what are some of the significant things to contemplate as it relates to product-led growth? Because that for me is a really, really hot topic. It's on everybody's mind, probably comes up at least once a day for us in conversations with customers. So let's start with your definition of product-led growth.
Yeah, I think, for putting it very simply, product-led growth comes when your customers typically adopt your product more often than not in a self-service manner. They use it, it works, they get great outcomes from it, and then they spread the word virally, and you start to see adoption and revenue come from the back of that. And so, it's interesting that you put the context and the change in dynamics in the market, John. I think we've gone from an era of sales-led growth, where your primary lever to drive growth was investment in sales capacity, to an era of marketing-led growth, especially, with the emergence of the internet and modern marketing technologies. That was a big trend. But today we find ourselves in this era of product-led growth, right? Where customers, very often developers, are adopting the product without ever talking to a salesperson, and sometimes without ever engaging with any marketing content. And so that has great benefits, obviously, because you put your product in the hands of your customers, and they sell your product. They become like a distribution channel for you as such. But it also presents a lot of challenges as you scale. It's a very efficient model to scale, but and some companies can scale, very dramatically using that model. But very often than not, you'll find that most companies realize at some stage they've got to start investing in distribution, and they've got to start investing in customer success, and then also, in sales and in value-based selling. And so what was really interesting for me to see here at Segment was we had a lot of product-led growth. We scaled, to multiple millions in ARR off the back of the fact that, a lot of developers and engineers really loved Segment. It became a really no-brainer way for them to collect and clean customer data rather than going and writing custom code themselves. They would use our API. And so we saw tremendous growth that was led in that fashion. But by the time I joined, it was very clear that we'd have to make some very significant investments in distribution and in, sales and success to ensure that growth continued.
Was really, really interesting to me was when you and I were talking in the beginning stages about kind of like the initial sale. NX Segment, the initial sale was powered so tremendously by developers and the use of the product and the landing and expanding of the product, but the technical expertise matched with technical buyers. So there was an initial sale, and then as you were coming on, it was the product was maturing, the buyer was actually changing. So this was something that I think, and by the way, this is something I think is going on for a lot of product-led growth companies. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the awareness and the nuances of going from an initial technical sale to a more mature product and where it actually leaves buyers? Buyers actually change inside the company.
Yeah, that's right. And so when you think of a lot of the problems that we solved for developers and engineers at the early stage of adoption of Segment and in our growth, we were really solving a time to value problem, right? I mean, if you're a developer or an engineer, what you want to do is you want to be focused on building product. Right? But there are a lot of other things that developers have to do. And more often than not, they're tasked with writing custom code to collect customer data across a variety of platforms, web, mobile. And that's a distraction, right? And so what Segment offered them was a really clean, unique way to accelerate time to value by having a single API that you can use to collect customer data instead of writing custom code. And so that was a no-brainer for many developers to adopt, right? They could then focus on the things that they wanted to do. And, that was great because now these companies could collect customer data using our API. They could clean it. They could unify it. They could get a single view of their customer. But what was interesting was as usage of the product, matured within the organization and as the company grew, the ultimate owner of the deployment was not the developer. It was more often than not the marketer. And what we found as Segment became more deployed in these companies was that we often had to go back and resell our deal all over again to a completely new buyer at the time of renewal and expansion. And for the marketer, the value driver is very, very different, right? For the marketer, they're looking to grow efficiently and accelerate growth with a modern marketing tech stack, right? They're looking to ensure that they can govern that customer data in a secure and a compliant manner, right? They're looking to be able to make data-driven decisions. And that's a very different value driver from, accelerating time to value for an engineer or for a developer.
Yeah, it's fascinating because this is a significant problem out there in the marketplace. First of all, you can't compete. The good news is you've got companies that have product-led growth strategies that are typically run by technical founders and technical teams that do an unbelievable job of creating, back in my day, it was, in the sales-led growth, it was like, go sell and you can overcome product issues. And the great news today is that you have significant product superiority, but the challenges are that product superiority only gets you so far. First of all, you got to be able to differentiate yourself because there's many companies that are product-led growth in your same space. So you have to be able to technically differentiate to that buyer, but you have to attach yourself to a positive business outcome as the product matures and as the usage of the product matures for other use cases or extended use cases. Talk a little bit about, and I remember you having this conversation with me when you saw that early. You said, like the value framework from Command of the Message, the value framework was so critical for you because it allowed your company and your sales teams and your technical teams to sit kind of smack dab in the middle where technical requirements are attached to business outcomes. Could you talk a little bit about your experience with the framework itself in that environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was incredibly impactful. I think when you're looking at evolving product-led growth, it's really about accelerating a flywheel, right? You want to use your sales force as a point of acceleration for that flywheel rather than being a point of friction. And, bearing in mind that, your usage of the customer's usage of the product is going to change over time after that initial land. What you want to be able to do is align your solution to the customer's biggest pain points, right? And understand and get really clear on what are those pains, right? What are the negative consequences of those pains? And what is your buyer trying to achieve? What outcomes are they trying to achieve? And what required capabilities will they need to achieve those outcomes? And that's where the value framework became so critical for us, because it gave us a common language, not only to talk internally about what problems we solve for our customers, but to talk to our customers about those problems, to do deep discovery and understand, what are their pain points and what are the impacts that they're driving across the business? What are the outcomes that they're trying to achieve? How do they measure success, and how will we help them get there? And for us, that was truly transformative, because we were no longer talking about features and functions and speeds and feeds, and it had a company-wide transformation because it enabled us to get really aligned to driving outcomes for customers, which had a downstream impact on the level of focus that our engineering team and products team could bring to their roles. And also just dramatically helped us improve our retention and our expansion rates, because, we were getting to the point where, in having to resell a deal all over again because the buyer had changed and because the value driver had changed, we were facing some retention challenges. And when you align to your buyer's biggest pain points and you convince your buyer that your product is going to help them solve those pain points and achieve the outcomes that they're seeking, that's when you create value as a salesperson. That's when you lay the ground for your product to be retained and for further expansion opportunities.
I love that. It's one of the greatest examples of full adoption and utilization of the concept of the value framework from Command of the Message. And it brings me back to this, which, by the way, is a company transformation. It's not a sales transformation. It's not a product transformation. It's not a go-to-market transformation. It's all of the above. And one of my favorite conversations at Segment, one of them was when you gave me the heads up that you guys are going to get bought for $3.2 billion. And that was such a great outcome. We were so proud to watch you guys to watch you guys experience that. It's and again, congratulations. But one of my favorite conversations was with one of your co-founders, Calvin French Owen, and he actually called us and he said, "Hey, John, would you guys do a podcast with us that we can share with our customers?" And I said, "Of course. What would you like to talk about? I'll do it in a heartbeat. What would you like to talk about?" And he said, "I would love to talk about the concept of building the value framework and the alignment between our go-to-market and our product." And it was unbelievable. First of all, we'll attach that to this podcast and make sure that everybody has access to it. It's one of my favorites because it is a technical founder talking about how critical it is to align the product with go-to-market. And so I wanted to just kind of get us in that headspace for a second, because it's one of the first things that you did with your counterparts in product. Would you kind of elaborate that on a little bit and like how you drove alignment, not just for go-to-market, not just for product, not just for company positioning, but for the entire company?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges, I discovered early on was that our product team were having difficulty maintaining focus. And that was in a small part due to the fact that they felt that customer expectations were being misset sometimes with with customer base. They also felt that they were spending all of their time on technical escalations from the customer base. And then they weren't always completely crisply clear on what it was that they needed to build. And, when I looked at this challenge, it became clear to me that the upstream cause of that was the fact that we were out selling on feature and function and speeds and feeds. Right. And so we weren't trying to understand what are the big pain points that we need to solve for our customers. And so because of that, we were unable to give clear feedback to our product teams about what exactly it is that our customer base needs them to build. Right. And so we often ended up going out building things that, were a distraction for us and that didn't allow our products teams to focus. I think the other challenge that we saw was that we weren't asking customers to participate in their own rescue, right? We were selling product and sometimes expecting that our engineering team on the back end would manage any issues that customers ran into. So a big part of solving that problem was to introduce a professional services motion to ensure that we had really clear expectations defined and agreed with the customer around what success looked like, and that we had great clear handoffs from the sales team to the success organization. And so, those things those challenges were challenges that I felt like the value framework was going to give us the right construct to be able to solve. But first of all, by aligning what we were selling to customer pain and customer problems, and giving our sellers a very clear way to do discovery, uncover pain, and align our solutions to their top of mind business concerns. And then once we had done that, we defined the required capabilities, we defined what the success metrics look like, we were now in a position to be able to do a very clear, clean handoff to our success organization. And then that handoff and agreement and participation from the customer in the process allowed us to ensure much better outcomes for our customers. Right? We saw retention improve, we saw expansion improve, but the most dramatic thing for me, and I think for Tito, our chief product officer, was that we saw transformation also on the product side. The product team were now all of a sudden freed up from being swamped with customer escalations, and they were able to focus on building product and building sound roadmap and improving product quality, which had, again, that flywheel effect on improving our retention rates and giving us a lift in being able to sell to new customers because we had a really clear, crisp product roadmap that aligned with what customers needed from us. And so, you know, making that transformation, you know, across the company is not an easy thing to do. And the value framework was such a critical part of that. But it doesn't work unless everybody is bought in. And so what I most appreciated about the approach that Force Management allowed me to take here and allowed us to take with the company was that it was a very inclusive approach. We brought everybody around the table, and we brought our product engineering, our marketing teams, the sales team, sales engineering team, our founders and CEO. We all participated in that workshop and in building out the framework and answering those questions. What problems do we solve for our customers, and how do we solve them? And that became, you know, our mantra. It became the way that we talk about the product. It became the way that we talk about the future and the direction of the company, and gave us very clear focus and alignment. It was really impactful.
Wow, Joe. So just summarizing, we talked in the beginning about the value to the buyer and the value to the selling organizations as it relates to approaching a buyer and to approaching collective buyers inside of an account as your product acquisition and adoption continues to mature. You've now taken us down the path that says, because of taking an outside-in approach, starting with the problems that you solve for your customers, how specifically do we solve them? How do we solve them differently or better? And where have we done it before? This created an aligned, common language and common framework that allowed all the organizations to plug in and kind of know what their swim lanes were. And I just think the way that you guys adopted it, the way that you guys drove success around it, is incredible. It's like Tito's organization knew exactly, they got grounded on, this is what we need to be focused on because these are the problems we're solving. Sellers could count on product teams and marketing teams to provide them content, learning, and understanding because it was in a common language. Hey, these are the problems you solve. Here's your buyer. These are the problems you solve. Here's how you solve them. Here's how you solve them differently or better. And here's where we've done it before. It's like that complete aligned effort is just a great example, and no doubt in my mind, which led to your outstanding growth and then a great outcome for you guys. So now what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is transition gears a little bit and speak to our kind of CROs out there that are that are kind of contemplating how to accelerate this growth and some of the things that it's going to take, and maybe how do you get alignment? How do you get alignment around that? One of the things I just want to kind of highlight here that you've talked about, which I really love, there's like two main skills right now that I see that are just critical skills out in the marketplace. Sales organizations have to be able to attach to customer biggest business issues. And then they also have to differentiate themselves through the technical product capabilities. And you'll hear me talk about this, is like companies have to have both feet planted in the technical world and in the lines of business world. And where people do that really, really good, really well. And what you've just articulated is the framework really helps us do that. Let's talk about some advice for CROs in the first 90 days, where you may be in this product-led growth situation. You've got a young, brilliant technical founder, and you find yourself in the challenges, in the high expectations of product-led growth. Could you just kind of give kind of like your first 90 days kind of thought process of what you would do?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Well, obviously those first 90 days are critical, and you've got to build trust, and you've got to build credibility, and you need to build alignment. And most likely you're going to find a lot of challenges, and you can't solve everything at once. You have a lot of different competing priorities. So I think the first thing you've got to do, obviously you've got to do deep discovery, right? And you've got to understand what those challenges are. And so one of the things I did was I adopted a very structured discovery process, and I interviewed pretty much everybody in the executive team,
I remember.
and everybody, every leader of every function, all the way down to sales reps and success reps. We went on it did about 50 hours of interviewing, and from that I was able to really kind of synthesize what the key challenges were. And of course, you end up with more things than you can bite off and fix. And so, I really made a big bet as to what was the highest impact thing that I could do to drive transformation. And that was to get alignment across the company on what the biggest challenge was, right? And then get everybody bought into solving that. And that's where, the value framework helped me enormously. And the engagement with force management. But I will say this, right? Whatever you choose to do as a CRO to drive transformation, you've got to be 100% bought into that. And the entire organization has to know very clearly that this is the priority. And then it's not enough for you just to be bought into it. Everybody above you needs to be bought into it too, right? So if your CEO isn't on the same page as you, the organization's going to see that, and they're not going to be as bought into it as you are. And so one of the first things I did was actually talk with my CEO, Peter Reinhardt's amazing founder and CEO, and he recognized this very clearly. And he suggested that we get force management to talk to the board. And, so I exposed this transformation effort to every board member and actually got the board bought in from the top down. And so that was enormously helpful. Once the company sees that the board, the founders, the CEO, all of the executive team are bought into this as the biggest transformation initiative that you're driving, then everybody gets bought into it. And that's how you actually make change. So I guess my advice is, do your discovery, figure out what the big challenges are, pick one P1. You can only have one P1. And then make sure you get alignment across the executive team and even at a board level as to the choice and the avenue of transformation that you want to drive.
It is one of the greatest segment for me, is one of the greatest examples of alignment throughout an entire organization. The critical areas of alignment that we typically run into is the functional areas of, product and marketing and sales and customer success. And, but the level of alignment that your organization, and my hat's off to you and Peter and the board members, I was in on, it was Peter's suggestion. We were talking about a couple of board members that we were going to talk to, and it was Peter's suggestion that he set up conversations with all of the board members. And that, for us, of being a partner to yours, like getting insights on the things that they thought that segment did really, really well, the things that they thought were going to be challenges, for us, just gave us so much great insight. And so they would have like kind of a philosophical representation in the engagement, because we were constantly balancing that feedback in working with you. And I think you were telling me earlier about one of the proud moments that you had when you actually built the framework. So you went to them and said, okay, we're going to do this big expenditure with force management, but we all know because it's attached to the P1 that we're working on, and you actually delivered the value framework to each of the board members. Would you just kind of share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was obviously a very gratifying moment to deliver such high quality output and put it in the hands of the board members. But I come back to the fact that if you're going to make a big bet on a transformation like this, why wouldn't you want to ensure that every one of your board members was read into and behind what you're doing? And you as you start out as an NEC level executive, you need to have the confidence and credibility with the board. And so, it just makes sense to get your board bought into what your big bets are and what your transformation initiatives are. But of course, again, it's all about the outcomes, right? It's all about delivering. And we had a very rigorous board who, they were very clear in ensuring that I had defined success metrics for this program and that we could tie it back to improvements in retention, improvements in efficiency, improvements in sales productivity. And, I'm very happy to say that we delivered on all of those.
Yeah, brother, it's one of our proudest moments. It was a blast to work with you on the project with your team and, all of your team, your extended team, the product folks, the marketing folks. There's just no surprise to us that you guys wound up with a great outcome of being acquired by a great company for a great price. And so our hats off to you. Joe, as we wrap it up here, and you and I have been preparing to have this conversation, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would have expected me to ask you about? Anything that you were thinking about as we were preparing? Any last words that you want to share with our listeners?
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, brother.
So I think, it's been a really good conversation. I certainly enjoyed it, John. I would just come back to saying that, enablement of your sales team is obviously a very critical requirement for success when you're trying to grow. And the environment that we find ourselves in today, it's not always just about product-led growth or marketing-led growth. At some stage, every company is going to need to invest in distribution. They're going to need to prove the value that they're delivering to customers. And so, my advice, if they were to ask me what my advice is for technical founders who are starting out, is don't wait too late to start building your go-to-market muscles. Invest in it as early as you possibly can, because it'll pay benefits down the line.
Brother, so well said. That's a great way to wrap it up. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to you and your family. I know you've just made the family transition post-COVID back over to the United States and in Menlo Park there. And we wish your kiddos that are experiencing a little bit of that fun life in California, we wish you great success. Thank you for spending the time today, and thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights on such critical topic as things like product-led growth, alignment, and value frameworks. And brother, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, John, and thanks to the whole Force Management team for all the help you've given us over the last 2 years.
Pleasure.